So, very good evening to you. Welcome to Your Wealth, a show that looks at all things money markets and investments. And today, we're going to be talking about agribusiness. This is a sector that so many people have been trying to get into, and they have questions on how they can do that. How can they sustain, the agribusiness sector, and also if there's a future in that sector. And in the studio today, I'm joined by Wenceslao Nyamupfukudza, who is an agribusiness consultant, and is going to be helping us unpack all of the questions that needs to be answered in regards to agribusiness. Welcome to Your Wealth.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Let me get straight into my first question. What should someone consider before leaving a stable job to venture into agribusiness full time? Because I've seen you talking about, if you are ready, you can actually, get into that venture. You can start something in the agribusiness. So what can someone consider before they leave their job?
Thank you so much. It's actually a very powerful question. In fact, there are a few things that tend to be ignored by people who are investing in agriculture, especially for the first time. The first thing is you need to understand if you really have pinpointed all your objectives, that the purpose of why you are leaving the job that you have. If it is investing in agriculture for the sake of a hobby, probably it might be exciting. But if you are to do agriculture as a business, which I think you are substituting your white-collar job or whatever that you've been doing, pursuing agriculture full-time, one thing that you're supposed to be looking at is, number one, your financial capacity. Do you have the sufficient money to invest in that business? Because farming itself is a very strenuous investment. It's an investment which requires a lot of money. Depending on which projects you're going to look at, sometimes you might need maybe 10, 15, or even 100,000, depending on where are you starting. But regarding to the kind of business that you're working with, you need to understand the key to which I consider the golden rule, the return per money invested as well as the return per time invested. You might need to compare. Are you better off working for another company, or you are better off investing in agriculture? Because in agriculture comes with a lot of challenges. We are talking about things that are beyond your control, the climate-related issues, the market fluctuations, the knowledge-wise. Do you have the actual knowledge to get into the business? And the most important part, the markets themselves. You might actually lose everything simply because of a simple change in the market dynamics. And of course, the other key things, do you have the networks? Because if you have to do agriculture at a bigger scale, like doing business that can actually say, you know what, people have to look back and say, you know what, this person is actually doing serious business. You have to have the right people to surround yourself with. And not forgetting the knowledge, because if you do not have skills, knowledge, or just an insight in the entire value chain of the business itself, you might actually see yourself struggling, trying to make things end, or just end up doing the Nike way, just doing it. Or you might end up struggling yourself, but going through the paralysis just to make sure things end, things meet. So if you are to start the agribusiness venture, you need to have a whole picture of the things, which I then can summarize into 5, which is number 1, you need to have your cash investment. Number 2, you're supposed to make sure that the markets is well mapped out, whether you're doing contract, whether you're doing you're identifying your own markets there. You have to make sure that the offtake agreements are well set. Offtake agreements, I'm basically saying you have got someone who is going to buy, and you've got written agreements. Number 3, you need to have your network, which is very strong. So the network is not necessarily talking about the buyers who say, you know what, you can come and buy. I'm also talking about the people, the agronomists, or the consultant who can actually, you have on speed dial. And number 4, you're supposed to have the knowledge, the skills. Or if you don't have the skills, you're supposed to have someone with the skills. And number 5, the plan. You're supposed to know what exactly are you going to do, so that everything is simple and straightforward. So I think those are just the key things that you're supposed to look at. And it's not an investment where you can just, you know what, I've seen someone investing in agriculture and they're making a lot of money. I also want to do that. You are probably going to lose almost everything. It's not like a threat, but agriculture is a risky business. I hate to see people losing their hard-earned cash. Sometimes someone would save a lot of money, maybe someone say, on my retirement, I'm now going to leave. So those are just some of the key things that we need to look at.
Yeah, interesting. The fact that you point that you need to have a plan before you get into it, and also I like the fact that you said it's not a threat.
Yeah.
One needs to be really organized before they get into. So I believe
Yes.
our viewers, as they are watching,
Yeah.
they're actually learning to say, you know what, I need to put these things, these 5 factors into play before I venture into agribusiness. Now, agribusiness is often romanticized, but what are some of the common misconceptions that people have when making the switch from white-collar jobs to farming?
Wow, a lot of people actually romanticize agriculture. You know what? In fact, it is only nowadays when agriculture is now being viewed as a get-rich-quick scheme.
Okay.
Where you know what, if you can do 100 hectares, or if you can do 1 hectare of cabbages, that's 40,000. If you sell $1 for 2, you're going to get at least 20,000. And people tend to forget that there is some of the things that you can't control. There is market which you can't control. There is a neighboring farmer who is doing 100 hectares and you only have got 1 hectare. That person can actually come and say, you know what, I'm going to sell $1 for 10. And now you are going to be left there wondering, okay, so what am I going to do? I've got just 1 hectare, you're supposed to now negotiate. But when you look at people who tend to overlook certain key things, for example, there are people who do not understand that agriculture itself, it involves a lot of key things. Most of them are not within our control. The things that are basically within our control is probably the amount of money that we can invest, and when the weather calamities we are not in control. For example, if there is too much heavy rains during that season, you wipe out all the entire crop. If there is a season where there is drought, you do not have backup irrigation systems. It might be a season where you've seen someone making money with tobacco and you say, you know what, I now want to also do tobacco. People are making money at the floors, and you get into that flow, you have no clear clue. And then someone simply end up just jumping in and say, maybe unokwanisa novhara kumashfloors ikoko. And at the end of the day, you lose almost everything, the fortune. And then when you are now starting the farming, I've seen a lot of people, some might have seen motivational videos. You know, I don't say motivation is not necessary. I've seen someone who has seen a TEDx talk, someone with a 1 hectare, and that person was doing 16 projects on a 1 hectare. You know, people tend to forget that you need to understand the return per money invested versus the return per time invested. Because if you do not understand how much money am I even wanting to get, let's say you want to get 100,000 per year or even per month, you notice that 1 hectare might actually, there are a lot of options that you can do on that single hectare. But when you then look at the financials, what is going to be required, some might actually have that money, but they do not have the right expertise and the competencies. And I've seen a lot of people quitting and going back to their former jobs. So you know what, I made the biggest mistake. Some even committing suicide. But this is not something that is people have to commit suicide. It's because running up in the moyo, you know. And at the end of the day, they tend to lose everything. And it's just very few things that needs to be looked into. And from there, you get your things right.
You get your things right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, for putting that across. And I think one thing that I've really taken note of is don't do it just because someone has done it. And don't do it just because you've seen a motivational video, social media, and think that, well, this is quite easy, I can just do this. So thank you very much, for laying this out and simplifying it for people to actually understand what they need to do when they, are ready to get into the agribusiness. So I think when we come back in the second segment, we'll talk more about, the issue about entry points into agribusiness, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you very much. Well, there you have it, viewers. This was our first segment of Your Wealth. We'll be right back shortly. Welcome back to the second segment of Your Wealth, and today we have Mr. Wenceslas Nyamufukudza, who is an agribusiness consultant, and we're just talking about how individuals can actually look into venturing, in the agribusiness sector, and also what you need to consider before you switch, from your ordinary job, getting into the agribusiness. So today we're just going to be focusing on that, and I hope you're going to be learning so much on this show. Now I want us to talk about the issue to do with aspiring farmers, with low capital? Because this is one the part you said which is very important when you're getting into, agribusiness. You need to make sure that you've got capital, investments, et cetera, et cetera. What are the most practical entry points into agribusiness, and how can they secure funding or support?
Right, thank you so much for that. So number one thing, which is almost straightforward, if you do not have sufficient cash, it does not necessarily mean to say you are not going to get into the business of agriculture. You might need to first of all have, probably the cheapest is to do crowdfunding, which is where you can 2 or 3 guys put together resources, and then they invest in their piece of land. But for them to do that, you need to also understand that you need to start at your level. There's this notion that people need to start small, of which there is no universal agreed definition of how small, what is small.
Okay.
So people definitely have to start at their level. And when you're starting at your level, from my personal experience, you need to start with the low-hanging fruits. Fortunately, with agriculture, depending on where you are starting, there's always a starting point, mostly depending on the type of projects you can do, because projects have got differences in terms of their capital requirements, of which in the business of agriculture, the most expensive thing is capital expenditure. Okay. So there are projects you can start which does not require so much expensive capital requirement. And then number 2, you then also need to look at certain agreements, contract farming. There are certain projects, which almost agriculture, almost most of the major projects are already known that if you want to make so much cash, you can invest in this. But the problem is the startup capital, of which you can do contract farming. But before you even do that, you definitely need to have collateral, so that when you are starting, someone is giving you the guarantee that you can actually start. But when you do not have all of those ones, there are certain things that I would definitely recommend people that it's not a crime to work with someone who has the resources whilst you are getting those things. You might work with someone who has everything, that person giving you cash, or that person giving you the leeway or even resources to begin with. There's a guy who started their agricultural venture by working for someone, and in return he was basically getting the inputs. But right now that guy is actually multi-millionaire in terms of he's doing tobacco and a bit of some horticultural projects. Okay. So it's actually a matter of working with those that have got the skills if you don't have, working with those that have got cash or other resources if you do not have. At the end of the day, you actually end up winning, because the goal is to win. So the formula on how do we get started might be different. So I think those are some of the key things that people might need to start with.
Okay.
And unless they want to start below their standard, which I don't think it's something that is exciting.
Okay. Now, I also heard you talking about the issue to do with time. And I wanted to ask this particularly on the issue of commercial horticulture. We've seen it being preferred as a starting point, for new agribusiness entrepreneurs, especially those looking for shorter to return periods. Why is it like that?
The answer is almost straightforward. When you are starting a business, remember when you do investment appraisal, when you look at which projects can I start with, those that have got low or short payback period, horticulture tends to have a very short period of payback period compared to other projects like green mealies, like tobacco, like those other long season crops. With the horticulture, we're talking about 90 days or 120 days you'll be harvesting your first project. So unlike tobacco, which requires at least even preparation, you start now. People who are doing tobacco have started preparation in 1 June, and now they are still they will be planting September 1, all the way to then harvest around March. So they've got almost a whole year, or in fact, precise 9 months. Where compared to horticulture, you're basically talking about 72 days, 2 months, or precise 2 to 3 months. You'll be selling your first produce. And at the same time, horticulture tend to be a bit less risky, depending on the nature, because the horticulture is a bit broad. We've got 5 branches. We've got the vegetables that we do. We've got the flowers. Nowadays, people tend to love so much flowers in Zimbabwe, I think because of the changes in the generations. And we now have got other branch, which is nursery production, basically producing seedlings for other farmers, which basically takes 4 to 5 weeks. And when you also look at other key components of that horticulture industry, it's not like a low-hanging fruit only. The returns are also a bit very high, because not a guarantee, because there are things that you have to make right.
Okay.
So horticulture, number one, the payback period. Number two, the return per dollar invested. Number three, return per money invested. And also the expertise. It's high, but it's a high risk, high return investment. So that's why people tend to only focus on that.
Okay, now I want us to talk about technology, because I know this is a very important component when it comes to agriculture. And I understand that drone technology is becoming more prominent in agriculture, which was not there, back then. How is it changing the way farmers manage crops and land, and is it accessible to small-scale or startup farmers?
It's actually an exciting technology. In fact, we use drones to spray 100 hectares within a single day. One drone, 100 hectares one day. If you were to look at it in comparison, you'll notice that per day, when you are using some of the highly sophisticated tools, or boom sprayers, you would require about 50 to 60 hectares. I'm talking about high-end tractors. But look at the cost component. With a drone per hectare, you're covering about from $15 to $20 per hectare. But when you look at the same per tractor, that's about $50. So you're saving more than $20 per hectare.
Okay.
So, and then when you look at the affordability, it's actually way too affordable for any farmer out there. The only difference is that you don't necessarily need to buy the drones, because they are a bit expensive. In fact, to be straightforward, they're expensive to buy for an average person. And then, but the good thing is you can get those services from those service providers who have got drones. And then when you look at the affordability from smallholder farmers, if farmers are to organize themselves and to actually acquire those tools, it's actually way too advantageous. We're talking about drones that are used to plant. Right now we've been in the season of planting wheat and barley. Drones being able to actually cover with efficiency those key things. There's technologies that like variable rate fertilizer application, variable rate chemical application, where you only focus on the problem areas and not necessarily spraying everywhere, just to make sure that the problem is solved. So when you look at those key things, it's actually an advantage to almost the smallholder farmers, medium-scale farmers, but to the best advantage is the large-scale commercial farmers, because they streamline a lot of things.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for outlining, why drone technology is that important for farmers in this day and age. And when we come back in the last segment, I think we're going to be talking about the issue to do with strategies, on how someone can actually sustain their agribusiness, venture. So this is something that we'll look at in our third segment.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, viewers, for joining us in our second segment. We'll be back shortly with the final segment. Welcome back to the final segment of Your Wealth, and today we are talking about agribusiness, its advantages, how you can actually venture into it, the things that you need to know and prepare for as you get into that sector. So in the studio, I'm joined by Wenceslas Nyamufukudza, who is an agribusiness consultant, and is going to be helping us, just to talk about some of the issues pertaining to agribusiness. Now, I want us to talk about the issue to do with strategies. Now, what are some low-cost, high-impact strategies for someone trying to build a sustainable agribusiness while still employed full-time?
Wow, this business, the agribusiness part it doesn't have to be that difficult. But for us to be able to do that, you have to understand, like what you have said, the strategies, which are the step-by-step procedures. What can I do to make sure that my business is safe? I will answer that using an example of one or two people that we've been working with. We've got a medical doctor, the person started with 20,000 chickens. The person had no clue completely on what is it that they are getting into. And when we helped the person to get started, the first thing that was looked into was having a clearly detailed land use and management plan about the land. This is a detailed plan which talks about who are the people, what are the key components that you are going to require in your investment. Number one. Number two, it talks about who are the people who are going to manage that project. Number 3, it's like creating a soccer team where you are the coach. You're not be you, and then you create the captain. You create the players. These are going to be the defense team. These are the strikers, and this is my goalkeeper. So you set up that business, and it's like a soccer team where if you are the coach, you don't necessarily need to be in the field, but you are looking at the potential problem areas. But being the coach does not necessarily mean to say you know everything. You then hire the people who can give you the insights. You know what? This is the potential problem. In Shona, we say, Muzivo nzira parivare ndiye mfambi wayo. So if you have someone who is giving you insights and giving you insight, you know what? Potentially we're going to have this problem. Vakambofamba nemo, now they know where is the problem. So if you have got that is a clearly detailed team that can give you insights, how to get started, how you are going to manage the project. But if you are employed full-time is actually an understatement. There are people who are actually in diaspora managing successful projects here in Zimbabwe. We're talking about thousands of miles away from home where projects are actually being done effectively well. But this does not necessarily mean this does not necessarily mean to say you are ignoring your project. You have to have a clear plan on how you are managing it. Because if we are to then also speak in Swahili language, they say kusimamia, which means you have to supervise everything that's happening. It actually goes further and say it is what you inspect that you get done and not what you expect. So you need to have someone who does that for you, and you are making sure that you are no longer going to do all the heavy lifting. You are only focusing on from the pyramid, you are at the top, and then someone is covering everything with the bird's eye view. Or then you have to employ strategies where you can be able to see things clearly on the entire, having the bigger picture of what is happening, maybe using technologies or other tools like crop monitoring systems, farm management platforms, bookkeeping platforms, so that you have got everything at in your fingertips. I think that can be a bigger plan, like that can be a smarter strategy to then get things done perfectly right.
Well, now having put those strategies in place, how can a new farmer identify and prepare for market access, like both regional and international, to ensure that their produce just doesn't grow, but it also sells?
That's perfect. It actually came at the perfect time because right now I'm actually coming from delivering a lecture at Eagle's Nest Zimtrade, which is also a company that does export, that energizes Zimbabwe's export potential by offering training and so forth. So if someone is investing in the business for a start, you know what, there's no abracadabra. There's no abracadabra or there's no magic in to say, you know what, you can just all of a sudden you are now a pro or you're now an expert, you now know. The simple thing which I can recommend is to have a systematic process. Before you invest in this business of agriculture, always identify the key players that you're going to require, number one. Number two, you need to understand fully the ecosystem that you are playing it. Who do I need for this kind of operation? Who do I need for this area? I understand that it's not something that is straightforward, because for you to even know who do I need for this, you should be able to know what is it. For instance, if I would tell you that you need to draw an elephant, you should actually have a picture of the elephant in the mind.
In the mind, yes.
So the same also happens when you are dealing with a startup farmer. The farmer has to have a picture of everything. Like, okay, what does your farming venture look like? You then have to identify everything that you are not picturing correctly, and you then have to identify the people that you are going to have. Because for your success in agribusiness, it also depends on the people and the process as well. So the people are the ones that then run the process. So if you do not understand the people that you're going to require, I can guarantee you, no offense, but I can guarantee that you are poised to fail, because the business can only sustain by you understanding the people and the processes.
Quite interesting. Now, as we wrap up, what would you want to say to that person who is watching right now and, having listened to you, there's 30 minutes and capturing what you were saying, and they're now thinking in their head, you know what, I really want to do this. What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing is, if someone has got money, number one, I mean, money is non-negotiable when investing in agriculture. Personally, I've been in the farming business for the past 10, if not 11. This is my 11th year in the farming business. I've seen people losing everything. This is not a joke. Losing everything, investing 100,000 and losing much of it. Investing into certain projects and losing everything. So the key thing is there's no shortcut to this whole thing. At least if you now have someone who has gone through the same pathway you want to go, find that person, let them lead you, or let them find a mentor to actually say, okay, I want to invest in this farming business. Just hire that person as a consultant. So you know what, I just want to do this business, but I don't know if this decision is the best decision. What are the things that I need to understand? Because farming, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
Sometimes you might need to have this different view or this different approach. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that it's sustainable and it's contributing to sustainable development of the investor who is you, and not to make sure that not to leave you with chest pains, having lost much of your bigger chunks in the investment, and to then pretend as if it's a Ponzi scheme or it's a pyramid scheme. It's actually a business that is sustainable, but it has to be done perfectly, very well. And if you do not know, do not try things that you do not do, that you don't know, and never do shortcuts. But of course, above all, you need to maintain the momentum, because there will definitely be ups and downs. Even if you've done almost everything correctly, there will always be here and there problems that you need to deal with. And I would recommend people to always maintain the momentum, because that is what then differentiates those that win in the end and those that lose everything.
Right.
Ultimately, you definitely need to have the pain of discipline or the pain of what? Regret. So at the end of the day, the farmers have to have the proper discipline to have the momentum and never lose what? Heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, for coming through, Mr. Nyamfukudza. It was quite an interesting program. You do have information, I must say that. And it was quite good. And I believe, our viewers have really enjoyed and have learnt, a lot in regards to what they should do when they are considering leaving their white-collar jobs and venturing into agribusiness full-time. So thank you very much for coming through to your
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure being with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, viewers. This was Your Wealth, and today we were talking about agribusiness, and I hope that you managed to, get some few points that will help you or motivate you, to actually get yourself ready and, getting into the agribusiness. But of course, the main key point, don't do this without proper planning, and always make sure you have someone that can mentor you so that you can start your business on a good footing. So thank you very much, and see you next time.